So today we're talking about Chardonnay. We have our estate Chardonnay and the Casteel Chardonnay. We have Chardonnay planted really all over the property. This section was originally Riesling. It was torn out and replanted in 1994. Directly to the east of that is our Wente Chardonnay. So these were cuttings that were taken from the Wente vineyard in Livermore, California, and literally just stuck in the ground at Bethel Heights. They're original, planted in 1977. And then we have 3 small blocks of Chardonnay planted down at Justice. Planted in 1999, so they are primarily Dijon selections, much like it was planted in 94. Clone 76, Clone 95, and Clone 548. Now these 5 blocks are all in some way represented in the estate. In a lot of ways it is sort of the most comprehensive of the wines we make because it does encompass the Chardonnay we have planted really all over the property, just varying in percentages depending on vintage. Now, the Casteel is what we want to be the best expression of what we do in a given vintage. The reserve program at Bethel Heights has sort of ebbed and flowed throughout the years. There was a 96, I believe there was a 99. But when I started working here, as a family, we decided to sort of breathe new life into the project in 2011, and we've made it ever since. What we found throughout the process here is, as much as we wanted it to be sort of a best barrel selection, the best wine that we can conceive from a given year, you end up finding that the best wines are often coming from the same parts of your property over and over again. So while it was sort of born of concept, it really has landed in a place. And that's not to say that we won't change it, because things do change. Our weather in Oregon is dynamic. But I find that we have been landing just right off the terrace. If you can see out the window, it's just right to my left. The block planted in 1994 of 76 to me has been the most consistent quality we've had on the property really since I started here in 2005. Now we make these in very similar ways. I mean, we try not to treat anything as though it's going to be in one bottling or another. I mean, I think you always want to let the property surprise you. So we do really approach everything as though it could be in our Casteel. So we whole cluster press the grapes. As I mentioned before, everything is estate, so we're able to pick very early in the morning, very cold, very intact fruit. Everything is whole cluster pressed and moved into a settling tank. Will settle anywhere between 24 and 48 hours, depending on the vintage. And then we move into barrels. Fermentation gets going, and depending on the year, that will take anywhere between 30 to 50 days, sort of depending on the ambient temperature in the room. But we don't do a lot of manipulation. We don't do any stirring. We'll do a little bit just at the beginning of fermentation because yeast are big and they all want to fall down to the bottom. So I think it's good before they're producing enough CO2 to really kind of move them around. But I don't like stirring. I don't like the idea of moving things around simply because it's just the simple act of stirring a barrel is pulling oxygen in. And so we won't stir them once they drop below a certain amount of CO2 from the point where they're protecting themselves that they do during fermentation. And we won't stir them again. We go through complete malolactic fermentation just based on sort of where we are in Oregon. I mean, it's cold here. We do retain acidity very, very well. That's important for our program, but we do need to mellow it out. So malic acid, sort of made famous by Granny Smith apples, is very sharp, very tart. We want to round that out into lactic acid, which is the acid you find in yogurt, for example. Secondarily is we don't want to filter. And if you're going to attempt to go unfiltered in any percentage, you need to complete malolactic fermentation. So we'll be in barrel, a mix of different sizes, so a traditional 228 liter barrique, 300 and 350 liter hogsheads, puncheons. The oak percentage overall is about 33%, but it'll vary depending on the blends, depending on the vintage, just depending on the taste. We'll be in barrel for each for about 12 months, at which point we will stir them one time, bring everything up, and then rack them into either stainless steel tanks or stainless steel drums, whatever we can get completely full. So we'll get them into this big, tall, murky tank, and we will then seal it up, and we will leave it alone for anywhere between 3 to 6 months. A lot of it just depends on tastings we do after harvest to sort of determine where the wines are. The reason we use these tall, skinny tanks is twofold. They're tall, so they take a long time to settle. So all of that character that you get through batonnage of introducing the lees and trying to build some body, we can achieve the same thing. We can just do it in a very heavily gassed tank that doesn't involve a lot of oxygen. The other piece is that because they're skinny, they come to a fairly small space on the bottom where you have all of that pressure of a tall tank continuing to push down to break the lees down, to break the yeast down, to release a lot of that inherent sweetness that they have. It's tricky because we can also push a little bit of reduction if we're not careful. It's something that we're not completely averse to, but I think, you know, we want to make sure we stay on the right side of sort of flinty and not bridging too far, because at that point you've introduced an aromatic compound that makes the wines all sort of smell the same. So it's a tricky dance, but it's one that I think we've been pulling off well for the last few years. We will then bottle, typically unfined, unfiltered. If we do a filtration, it's at the very, very bottom of the tank, just a coarse filtration, because we do take all the lees. It takes a long time to settle all that out. And then into bottle and off to you. Thank you.